The Supreme Court has upended decades of legal precedent, this time dissolving affirmative action in colleges. Thursday's 6-3 ruling means universities can no longer use race as a blanket factor when choosing students. Liberal justices who dissented argued affirmative action helps, quote, equalize educational opportunities. On both sides, justices accused each other of a fundamental misunderstanding of the American promise, American history, and the state of race in American life. CBS News Chief Washington Correspondent Major Garrett has our report.
Writing for the majority, Chief Justice John Roberts said admission policies at Harvard University and the University of North Carolina violated the 14th Amendment's Equal Protection Clause. The student must be treated based on his or her experiences as an individual, not on the basis of race, Roberts wrote. Many universities have for too long done just the opposite. In a scathing dissent, Justice Sonia Sotomayor accused the court majority of ignoring history and precedent. The court cements a superficial rule of colorblindness as a constitutional principle in an endemically segregated society where race has always mattered and continues to matter. At the White House, President Biden criticized the conservative majority.
This is not a normal court.
And said the nation must find a new way to achieve diversity in college admissions.
What I propose for consideration is a new standard, where colleges take into account the adversity a student has overcome when selecting among qualified applicants.
The opinion also exposed deep personal and ideological divisions within the court. Justice Ketanji Brown Jackson, the first black woman to serve on the High Court, wrote in her dissent, quote, "With let them eat cake obliviousness, the majority pulls the ripcord and announces color blindness for all by legal fiat." Clarence Thomas, the court's other black justice, responded, quote, "Justice Jackson uses her broad observations about statistical relationships between race and select measures of health, wealth, and well-being to label all blacks as victims."
We won't go back!
Outside the court, students and civil rights leaders assembled to protest.
I think in this moment in time, it's important for every institution, from colleges to corporations, to commit to pledge to diversity no matter what.
Ed Bloom, the president of Students for Fair Admissions, brought the case to the court, arguing race should not factor into admissions decisions at all.
Ending racial preferences in college admissions is an outcome that the vast majority of all Americans of all races will celebrate.
CBS News polling shows that 70% of Americans think race should not be allowed as a factor in college admissions. But statistics indicate that in states that have banned affirmative action, such as California and Michigan, admissions for black and Latino students have fallen dramatically at their most selective universities. Shruti Kumar, a student at Harvard, opposes today's court ruling.
I think the idea that our society can be colorblind is a silly one. We don't live in a perfect meritocracy.
And Major Garrett joins us from outside the Supreme Court. And I'm also joined by CBS News congressional correspondent Nikole Killion here in the studio. Major, the Biden administration seemed ready for this, immediately announcing plans to promote diversity measures in colleges and universities. What do you think the practical effect of those measures will be, and what, of course, is the political effect?
Well, of course, there was an immediate evaluation of the Biden White House after this historic decision. What would it say, and would it have any ability to articulate a way forward? You might recall, John, after the Dobbs decision about a year ago, many Democrats and progressives were unhappy with the Biden administration, feeling it did not fill that void, at least not immediately. Now, in the White House's defense, they said at the time it was harder to point a way forward on abortion rights because that would be decided by 50 states with different political attitudes, different approaches. But on affirmative action, they believe there is a way to plot a way forward, in part because colleges themselves and those who are applying want to see diverse student bodies. How to achieve that? So the president gave voice to means by which that could happen, saying colleges can, among other things, look at financial background, look at the grit and determination necessary for a particular applicant to get to the point where they were qualified to enter that college or university. And that could be part of a broader, non-race-based assessment of their qualifications. And that could, he said, build out or continue to build out what he believes most colleges and universities want to achieve, which is diverse student bodies.
Nikole, Major just laid out what the White House is trying to do. What did you hear in terms of a reaction on Capitol Hill? And is anybody talking about legislation or a congressional fix to this ruling?
Well, reaction, as you can imagine, was pretty much split along party lines, with many Republicans praising this decision, saying that it was long overdue, that this will make the college admissions process fair. Democrats, on the other hand, really decrying this decision, some saying that they were at a loss for words, calling this decision disgusting. I was on a call earlier today with members of the Congressional Black Caucus, the Congressional Hispanic Caucus, the Congressional Asian Pacific American Caucus, also known as the Tri-Caucus, and some of the ideas that they brought up. Well, first and foremost, they point out this is going to be very tricky for Congress, that they can't really overrule a constitutional finding. And so, therefore, it's really about enforcement. They were calling, for instance, on the Attorney General and other federal agencies, for that matter, to really enforce any type of discriminatory practices, perhaps that may be found at a given college or university, and to be very aggressive in pursuing those types of cases. They also talked about this issue of legacy-based admissions, and I think that's a space to watch. Whether or not Congress can really do a lot on that front remains to be seen, but these lawmakers were very critical about how can the Supreme Court strike down race-based admissions, yet somebody whose parent went to a college or university, somebody who donates to a university can get in significant numbers, and how can those disparities be addressed? So those are a couple of the ideas. Obviously, Congress is out right now, so these lawmakers said they'll probably regroup once Congress gets back in session, but it really does beg this debate in terms of, what happens next, because we know there are some colleges and universities that already enforce these race-neutral policies, which will probably now get a closer look in light of this decision. But as Major pointed out, there are similarly in other states these programs where, as a result, we've seen a precipitous decline in the number of Black and Latino students that are being admitted to colleges and universities. So it is something that will have to be rectified not only through Congress, but again, that's why you see the administration trying to be out front on this.
Major, before we let you go, what did you think the president meant when he said this is not a normal court?
Well, we have a helpful explanation from the president himself. Later on this afternoon, he said exactly what he meant by that. And what he meant, John, is that he said this court does not follow precedent. And when it doesn't follow precedent, what often happens is injuries are inflicted on underrepresented communities in this country. And in the case of affirmative action, to pick up on a point Nikole just made, Michigan and California have real live experiences. Both states have excellent public universities, and they found after they banned race as a factor in college admissions, both in California and Michigan, those elite institutions in those states saw a precipitous decline in Black and Latino admissions. And they've worked tirelessly, they say, to try to find ways to work around that. And they haven't been successful, meaning they haven't moved the numbers back up to where they were before race was eliminated as a possible consideration in admissions. So this is very difficult terrain, but what the president meant was, when it comes to precedent, this court will ignore it, and when it has ignored it, he said, has inflicted harms on underrepresented minority communities in this country. John?
All right. Major Garrett, Nikole, Killion, thank you for being with us.